3 months ago, I was home alone when someone rang the bell of my house. My parents were not at home, and I haven't invited anyone else. So I wondered whether I should open the door or not. My friends never come unannounced to my house. It was 10 p.m., so it was dark and quite creepy. Yet I was extremely curious to see who came to visit me late that night. Finally, I decided to check who it was. I opened the door and saw a young and especially handsome man. I was stunned. I truly believed that this was the mysterious prince that I have been waiting for all my life. In just 2 minutes, I came up with hundreds of theories of why he is here. Can you relate to the imagination of a 20-year-old single girl? Nonetheless, I wasn't able to say a word. I was overwhelmed by his tall figure and deep blue-eyed look. So we both were just looking at each other. The mysterious prince introduced himself. However, he came with the lamest excuse on the planet. He said, "Sorry to bother you, but my tire blew out. Are you alone, or is there anyone that may help me?" I guess he was referring to my dad or another stronger figure. Anyhow, here's when I got scared. Reality hit me and I suddenly became aware that he can rob me, kidnap me, or even do something worse. And I am sure that he noticed the change in my attitude. I was as pale as a cloth. To calm me, he took a step back on the porch and decided to spill the truth. He said, "I'm not going to hurt you, but I need you to listen to me." I was about to slam the door in his face, but something kept me waiting. So I decided to hear what he had to say. He began the story by explaining that he was looking for me for months. However, he didn't want to scare me, so he came by as a random stranger at my door. I almost fainted when I heard this. Was he a maniac? A psychopath who has followed me for a long time? No, he was my long-lost brother. What a turn of events! All my life, I believed that I was the only child. I never had anyone to share my secrets or even fight with. My parents were always spoiling me, as I was the only center of their attention. Can you imagine the emotions I went through when I heard this? A brother? A 4-year-old, tall and handsome brother. Anyhow, the story gets even more complicated. I finally decided to invite my brother inside. We were talking for 2 hours, but he didn't want to share the story of how we were related. At least not until my parents came home. I could notice the confusion on his face. He thought I knew I had a brother. That's why he wanted to wait for my parents, or should I say, our parents. 2 cappuccinos later, I had finally arrived at midnight. May I remind you that there was a stranger in our living room? It was obvious that my parents didn't even know who he is. Their first assumption was that he was my boyfriend, and oh my gosh, here we go again. My protective father always felt the need to defend me against the male kind. At the end of the day, I was his little princess. So I can understand the reasons for his actions. He was about to fight my brother when he said, "Stop it, you know who I am. I am about to tell her." Long story short, we all managed to calm our frustration and sat on the couch. Suddenly, my mom started crying. I have never been more confused in my entire life. She said, "I hope that what we are about to tell you won't make you love or appreciate us less." I assumed that they gave my brother for adoption and they didn't want me to judge them. I instantly developed my theory that they were young and panicked. Apparently, I was about to forgive them. But believe me, when I say I was far from the truth. My mom was stuttering. Still, she wanted to be the one that reveals the whole story. She began by telling me about her pregnancy with me. She didn't even mention my long-lost brother. When I asked her why she is skipping that part, she answered, "You will understand." Apparently, there was an earthquake on the day when I was born. Can you guess how this justifies my newly discovered brother? Well, neither could I. To be more specific, I was born in our local hospital. My mother was struggling for days before I decided to come out. Obviously, I was indecisive even in the womb. It's a characteristic of mine that explains many actions I have taken in my life. Anyway, I was born in June. On this particular day, 16 other babies were born in the same hospital. It's not many, but as I said, it's a small town. And I should be lucky that there weren't more babies at the moment. I know it sounds confusing, but you will understand when I finish the story. During the conversation, my mom told me, as you already know, all babies look alike. Can you imagine my shock at the moment? My own mother couldn't tell me apart. Did they switch me with another baby in the hospital? And does this explain my long-lost brother? Well, I wish it did, but the reality was far worse. When my mother gave birth to me, she held me in her hands. Like any other mother, she wanted to smell me, to hug me and hold me tight. My father was right beside her during the whole journey. They were thrilled that they had a daughter. All their lives, they dreamed of having a girl. That's why I am as spoiled as I am. They truly gave me everything I ever wished for, from the fanciest clothes to the most expensive toys. But that's not what makes my parents special. They have always listened to me, dedicated their time and full attention to my concerns, and my mom and dad love me unconditionally, and they always will. So what could have happened on my birthday to make my mother so anxious? Is there anything that can stop me from loving them for a lifetime? Back to the story. My mother had to give me to the medical nurses. Then I was placed together with the other babies. This is the usual hospital procedure, so I still couldn't spot the problem. But as I mentioned before, there was an earthquake at the hospital. The important fact is that everyone survived this disaster. There were no victims in the accident. Well, except the sacrifice of the truth. I and the rest of the 16 babies were tangled together and transferred to a safe place. The issue is that the hospital didn't keep good track of our identities. There weren't any available DNA tests at the moment, so they decided to keep this as a secret. For years, the parents weren't aware of this issue. All that time, they believed that the hospital gave them their burst into tears. My mother started cursing my new brother. She started yelling and asking why he came. She was 100% convinced that I would blame them or even leave them as complete strangers, but she was wrong. I didn't blame my parents, not even for a second. I was just shocked by this new information. Can you imagine finding out that you have 9 more mothers, 9 more fathers, and a whole bunch of brothers and sisters? A baby. More specifically, there were 10 female and 7 male newborn babies. After a few years, the truth came out, but it was already too late. The parents have developed strong relationships with their children. My parents didn't want to put me through such a stressful situation from a young age. After all, they loved me as I am their own blood, even if I was not. As shocking as it sounds, I was then made aware that I have 10 mothers. Both my mom.
Hey, I'm Anita. I'm 15 and I have a disease called CIP, which stands for Congenital Insensitivity to Pain. This means that I don't feel pain like you do. In fact, I've never been in pain and I have no idea what it feels like. This is an extremely rare hereditary disease. My great-grandpa had it, and it skipped a few generations before it was passed down to me. I know you're probably thinking that feeling no pain sounds great, but I can assure you that it isn't as good as it sounds. We are meant to feel pain for a reason. It's there to warn us when something is wrong, whether it be a toothache, a fever, or when a substance is too hot. I've never been able to run a bath by myself. My mom has to run it for me and check the temperature. It also means that when I'm in the bath, I can't refill it with hot water in case I burn myself. I can feel hot and cold, but I have no idea what a burn feels like, or what being so cold your toes hurt feels like. I also have to cut up my food and let it cool down for 5 minutes before I eat it, so I don't burn my mouth. I don't even bother with hot drinks. I just stick to drinking juice. I watch my friends with curiosity when they accidentally hurt themselves. I just find their in-pain expressions so odd. My mom shut her finger in the trunk of the car and screamed before she walked off, shaking her hand for at least 10 minutes. If I shut my finger, I could cause myself more of an injury. My great-grandpa, the one who also had CIP, died at the age of 40 from heart disease. He didn't have any symptoms because of his CIP, so he had no warning signs that he was seriously ill. My parents are terrified that I will end up ill too and not realize it. They make me go to the doctors for a monthly checkup. There is no definite cure for CIP, although there are some experimental treatments out there. My parents have refused these, as they don't want me to end up feeling like a lab rat. They say it's up to me to decide if I want to try any when I reach 18. I have scars on my arm from when I was in a restaurant and spilt a boiling mug of tea on it, but because I didn't feel pain, I didn't flinch or put it under cold water. I once fell off a climbing frame and twisted my ankle, but continued to walk on it for the rest of the day. That evening, my mom saw my ankle was swollen and took me to the hospital. Turns out I'd badly sprained it and caused myself more injury by walking around on it all day. I was on crutches for weeks, not allowed to take part in any sports for fear of hurting myself, and I don't use the cooker or the kettle. My mom has to tell me if I need to put sun lotion on or to wear a jacket. If it's really sunny, my mom doesn't let me go out at midday as she's worried I'll end up badly sunburned. Even though I wasn't meant to play sports, once at lunchtime, I joined in with my friends and played basketball. A boy tried to take the ball off me, and I was shoved hard onto the ground. He was staring at me open-mouthed, and some of the other kids were gasping at me. I looked down at my arm. It had popped out of its socket and was hanging there limp. I hadn't even realized. The boy walked with me to the nurse's room, and I sat down on the metal frame bed all smiles. At least, that was until my body went into meltdown and I fainted.